All right. So welcome, Jasmin Hasanović. We're very pleased that you're here, even though you're not feeling super well. You will be giving us a talk on youth voices and the reimagining of democracy in Southeast Europe, which is a highly pertinent topic because democracy has to be constantly imagined and reimagined. Jasmin, let me say a couple of words about you. You're a political scientist, a professor of political science from the University of Sarajevo, and you are a specialist in social and political movements, and with a particular interest in post-Yugoslav politics. You're also interested in geopolitics, cyberpolitics, and generally in debates on democracy. This talk is being given in the context of the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence. This means that we are interested in problems of representation and whether the problems of representation have repercussions on the solidity or lack of democracies in general. So maybe we will learn something about our particular topic in this talk, maybe not. However, I'm very much looking forward to it, and I'm very excited to have you here today. I already told everybody that you're feeling slightly sick, so we will understand, and we're even more appreciative that you are giving us a talk despite your state of health. So over to you.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca, a lot. Well, to be honest, as I said previously, I'm really sorry that I'm not with you in Leipzig as I supposed to be this week. But yeah, I'm feeling better. It was some kind of virus infection or something like that. So fever and all that stuff, lack of appetite and that. But yeah, now it's better, and I even managed to come to my faculty in my office. So it's a good thing. Now I will just share my screen, and yeah, so hope that you see it. So yeah, so my idea is basically to talk about the youth voices in Southeast Europe. And to start with this, since you introduced me very well, so I don't have any additional need to say something about myself. So I will take just a few moments to share some things regarding the Southeast Europe as a region, in order to give you a clearer understanding of what we think when we talk about this region, and specifically the countries from where the youth is coming from. So here, basically, very surprisingly, the Southeast Europe is on the southeastern part of Europe. And also, as somebody who is dealing with geopolitics and also is teaching geopolitics, Southeast Europe is not only a geographical term, it's also a geopolitical term, as we can see that it is both transitional as well as peripheral part of Europe. So basically being a buffer zone with other regions connecting east with west and south with north. And due to this particular geographical position, it used to be historically a place where numerous conflicts and wars have occurred there. However, this region is also very diverse. I will just give you some examples of this diversity when we talk about Southeast Europe. It's not really easy that we can say it's a homogeneous part of the world, and nor also that the youth are homogeneous from this part of Europe. So here we see this demographical thing, and we can see here, for instance, how we have different nations like Turkey and Kosovo that are mostly young nations in terms of the age, of the overall age of the population, while on the other side we see some older countries like Bosnia and Herzegovina and Greece, sparing a lot of people that are above 45 years. When we talk about politics, it's also interesting that we have different political legacies in this part of Europe. During the Cold War, this region was under a strong influence of opposing blocs. We had strong Soviet-type real socialist regimes in Albania and Romania, for instance. And on the other side, we had Greece that had a right-wing military junta until 1974. Some kind of relative stability was in Yugoslavia since it was non-aligned during that time, the only European country that was basically non-aligned. But after the fall of socialism, Southeast Europe was marked by wars and isolation. And today the region is, of course, moving closer to European integration, which is also another parameter when we can see some differences between the countries, since we have here full EU member states like Slovenia, Croatia, Romania, Bulgaria, and Greece, and other aspiring states becoming EU members that are candidate states, except of Kosovo, that is a potential candidate. And even if we would dig more deeper, we will see the differences regarding the political system of the countries, where we have center-right or right-wing leaning governments, center-left or left-leaning governments. In Romania, we have this big coalition. And now the country where I come from, really hard to put it in those two categories, whether it is center-right or right-wing leaning or center-left or left-wing leaning, since the tricky part is that we have a power sharing system. So since the focus is on sharing power among different ethnic groups, it can be that you have some, let's say, more centrist or liberal political parties that are representing one ethnic group, while the other ethnic groups are presented by, let's say, more right-wing political parties. So that's the reason why I was not trying to put Bosnia-Herzegovina in any of those two colors, but found another one that I think is more suitable to say that this is a quite different political system. So even here we see that it is quite different and challenging to understand the region. Now, what is ongoing in the region? The most easiest and simple way to say what is ongoing is basically the everlasting struggle between more and less democracy, which is often being framed as a conflict between government and anti-government opposition, between corrupt government and anti-corrupt political and social forces. And it can be observed in the continuous waves of protests along different countries. Here I'm sharing some pictures from some protests just to show you this continuity of those protests. So I started, it could be traced even before, but I wanted to start with Bosnia. So I start with the protests from 2014 that arose in Bosnia. And why those protests were important? They were important because for the first time after the war, the protests challenged the constitution of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is based by this power-sharing settlement. The idea was to overcome this ethnic division, which is being institutionalized by these power-sharing mechanisms. So different ways of citizen plenums tried to be established, but only tried. Since we could talk about that, why was it successful or not successful? It's not part of this topic. But from Bosnia and Herzegovina till Macedonia, then it was called Macedonia. That's the reason why I named it here Macedonia, not Northern Macedonia. We have this so-called colorful revolution that was also an anti-government and anti-corruption protest. And we also remember the Romanian protests, also anti-corruption protests. And in the last months, our focus turns and needs to be turned to Serbia, bringing it into the spotlight with the ongoing student protests. I don't know how familiar you are, but what happened in Serbia in November last year, the railway station, a part of railway station in Novi Sad, after its renovation, basically collapsed. And it collapsed to the people that were standing and sitting down. So 16 people were killed, and several people were having a lot of struggles after that with very severe damages. So people ask responsibility and accountability of the government of Serbia for the disaster, raising questions about the renovation procedure and accusing the government for corruption. And this reconstruction was also financed by the One Road, One Belt initiative from China, where the president Alexander Vučić had close ties with both China and Russia. However, government denied the responsibility, even claiming that this part of railway station was not even reconstructed, so it's not the fault of the reconstruction. However, the students then started protests demanding two important things. The first one was they wanted all the documentation about the disaster and reconstruction to be published. And the second demand was they wanted that the investigation for the collapse and the tragedy should start. And since May this year, they also demand snap parliamentary elections as well, which the government, of course, doesn't really favor, of course. So by March this year, the protest spread almost all over Serbia, and it is supported by opposition professors, war veterans, actors, artists, farmers, so by a lot of social elements of Serbian society. And in other protest movements as well, not only in Serbia, young people played a significant role through the various innovative tactics, digital mobilization, and presence on the street. So that's basically one of the reasons we are, and particularly I am now focusing on the youth. And why is the engagement of young people important for democracy in Southeast Europe? Here we talk about this famous Generation Z, a generation that is born between the mid-90s and early 2010. And they are important because of different reasons. I can talk about it, but most of it probably you can also conclude. They are a specific generation that is socialized by digital media with a very strong influence of social media. So they share different, I would even say, new values in perceiving the reality, perceiving politics, perceiving the society. They also share diverse and hybrid identities. And those identities they share are very often even in contradiction to themselves, sharing two identities that you could probably not easily bring together. They share it, and they really identify with that identities as well. However, they are also agents of change and innovation. They have their own demands. They are trying to have that demands working for their own, and they struggle to make something to work for their own. So they are not only passive generation, maybe they are passive in terms we perceive what engagement is, but they find another channels how to be engaged. So that's the reason why it is quite challenging to approach them. And how we approach them, and that's what I'm going to address today. And yeah, unfortunately, that I'm not in Leipzig today. I wanted to bring you some of them, but I will find a way to bring you those publications. This is a series of publication that was made by Friedrich Ebert Stiftung of Southeast Europe. So we already had 3 rounds of this survey, and I had the luck to be called to be the main author and the lead author for the newest one, which is finished last year. And Ipsos did the survey. So the data was collected by Ipsos in the first quarter of 2024. So between February and March 2024, to be precise. And it involved almost 9,000 interviews from 9,000 young people from the region. Now, as a researcher, I and my colleagues that were working on this study. You have here the QR link, so you can scan it and download it for. We had a little bit complaints regarding the methodology used. One of the complaints was basically the scope, the number of the interviews that was done, because I think that for the region, it should be probably the number of young people should be a bit bigger, and also that some countries, I think, could have more respondents than they had. So that's the reason why I just want to say that it is an important study, but however, we need to address this data a bit careful, because they could be some methodological things that probably, because of the time, because of the resources, could probably be done a bit better. But yes, I will not complain, since I think that they somehow represent the results good if we give them a good explanation when representing. The primary focus was on individuals aged between 14 and 29 in 12 countries, meaning that mostly they basically included the Generation Z. And if we go back to the map, all of the blue countries are included except of Moldova and Cyprus. So most of the countries of Southeast Europe, or at least what is considered to be Southeast Europe, are concluded. And what is important is also just some methodological explanations that that this questionnaire we got from Ipsos was already done. So it was up to us as researchers to analyze the data and to write the study. So we did not do the questionnaire, nor we did make the survey. We only interpret the data we got. So the questionnaire included both general questions relevant to the regional level analysis, and specific questions that are important to different individual countries that are elaborated more in detail within national studies. So you have this regional study, which is a cross-national comparative study, but you also have for all those countries separate national studies that have been done. And you can also download it from the FES Southeast Europe webpage. Why this study is important? The national studies can give you probably more detailed things. The first one is that it gives us a longitudinal dimension, meaning that we analyze trends and shifts across the data obtained from the two previous waves of the survey. So we had the first one between 2011 and 2015, and the second one in 2018. And this is the third one in 2024. So we could observe different trends and shifts. And this allows us to see the changes over time in the region among youth. The second dimension, why is it important, is that we have a cross-national comparison, meaning that this dimension focused on identifying regional similarities and divergences in the attitudes and behaviors of young individuals. So this, on the other side, made us possible to see or to group some countries based on different important attitudes. The main goal of the study was to foster policy recommendations. And those policy recommendations were mostly for national and international actors in the decision-making process in the region. So now the most hardest question that we got after finalizing and going through this data is to give the answer, how and what are the young people in Southeast Europe like? And you saw that we have a lot of different approaches regarding Southeast Europe, regarding demography, political heritage, political culture, and so on and so on. So how to define the youth, since the youth is always a heterogeneous group, and Generation Z is always a struggle to define, having those hybrid identities and so on. So how to put this into one publication that can have all of it in a general way. We also had to come up with a subtitle in one sentence that would capture the youth of Southeast Europe the best, and that was mostly impossible. I mean, it's impossible, but then you need to generalize and simplify, which is, of course, something that can be very misleading. So when we talked about that, we gave two main explanations. How could we define the young people of Southeast Europe? They are independent and they are concerned in the same time. But I would add for the matter of this this lecture also that they are confused and polarized as well. And I will try to explain why do I think so. So let me start with the first question. Why are the young people independent? Overall, the results we presented show a trend of increased acceptance of abortion and homosexuality among the young people in 9 out of 10 countries compared to 2018. Just one note, in 2018, we had only 18 countries, and now we have only 10 countries, and now we have 12 countries. So the comparative part was possible only with 10 countries. So that's the reason why I will always, in some parts, mention 10 out of 10 countries, not out of 12 countries, because they are not comparable. So also we saw an increased share of non-religious young people as well, that especially among women who don't attend religious services or do not claim that they don't belong to any religious community. And we also saw a decline in ethno-nationalism in 5 out of 10 countries. Also, what was interesting is that compared to the previous round of research in 2018, the criteria for choosing a partner changed. Now, it could be somehow strange that there are some criteria for choosing a partner that should be analyzed from a political or sociological way. But when coming from countries with different ethnic conflicts, it can be something very important because nowadays we saw that fewer individuals consider ethnic or religious background, family approval, or even virginity as important for choosing a partner. And if we would conclude all of this, we would easily say that we see a support for freedom of choice or personal autonomy. However, those statistical indicators need to take into account 2 things. The first one is that there is always a possibility of socially desirable responses from the young people, depending on how the question was addressed. And also that we need to focus on individual practices in the observed countries, because this is only the sum up in the whole region. But we see variations in different countries. So this graphics here shows the relation between individual choice norms and something I will talk about later, that is a welfare state and how they approach the welfare state. The blue dots are the dots representing this study, and the pinkish red dots are those that are representing the previous study. And here we can see, if we would see this vertical axis, that we see a shift towards more individual choices than we used to have. I mean, you can take one country, let's say Bosnia and Herzegovina. You see that this pinkish red part in 2018 was much lower than it is right now, or even, I don't know, seeing Kosovo, or seeing, I don't know, Albania, Croatia, and so on and so on. So we see that it changed a little bit. So what I need to explain here is that what we did and how we measured this individual norms is that we merged items measuring tolerance towards homosexuality, abortion, and social distance towards LGBTQ plus community into a new separate variable, individual choice norms. And we see that there is, of course, an overall increasement of the individual choice norms compared to 2018. However, what still remains, if you see the numbers, is that the acceptance of abortion and homosexuality is still very low among the young people. And we see also significant differences among the countries. I mean, just compare here, for instance, the blue dots where Slovenia and Greece are, and where Kosovo and Albania are, for instance. Also, regarding being religious, it's not shown in this graph, but we measured by the question, apart from weddings and funerals, how often do you attend religious practices? And it measured from never to at least once a month. And seeing overall, the amount of young people that are feeling religious are still very high. And in some countries like Bosnia and Herzegovina or Montenegro, it has even increased, while in the other countries, maybe not, but still it's high. And also we have a high level of ethno-nationalism. Of course, it decreased comparing to the previous research, but it is still high. And also there could, this is the example here. When we would talk, for instance, an example of granting greater rights to the LGBTQ plus community, we see that overall their attitudes towards individual choice norms are going more libertarian. But when we consider other questions that are addressed very precisely, where you cannot give social desirable answers, then you see this, that the statement that members of the LGBTQ community have too many rights increased to 37.5% in this year compared to the previous study in 2018. So it's not something that you would say it's going more libertarian. Quite the opposite. Another example, what could be probably conclude, is a positive correlation between the support of lifestyle choices and personal autonomy on one hand, and the weaker support for the welfare state on the other side. And here you can again compare the dots, the blue one and those red ones, where you can see that there is a bigger shift when we see the axis of social of the welfare states. We see that it is shifting more towards left, meaning that it is decreasing, that we see a trend toward liberal values is opposite to the trend of supporting welfare states. However, what is my conclusion is that we need to make a difference between a practical distrust towards the social welfare state and the normative support for the welfare state. What does it mean? From a strong statistical perspective, yes, we have a decline. However, the problem here is the fact that young people in general do not trust their national governments. It's not about the welfare state as a concept. It's more about mistrusting their own national governments that should care about social services. So for instance, less than 20% of young people only trust their governments compared to almost 60% of those who don't. And just see here how many of young people trust political parties. Only 10%. So would you entrust a corrupt government, one you don't believe that represent you or is driven by nepotism and clientelism? Would you entrust that government with ownership of business and industry? Probably not. And what we saw is that one of the most dominant concerns of young people is not war. Of course, war increased, the fear of war increased because of different reasons. You have Ukraine, you have also some political challenges in Montenegro, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Macedonia, on Kosovo as well. But the most predominant concerns shared by young people are socio-economical concerns. 52.3 young people see having no job as the main concern, not the war, not having the war, not political instability, but having no job is the main concern. And 62.2% of young people see corruption as the main problem in the following decades, together with unemployment. So why to trust that redistributive policies could end up in the hands of those who abuse the system and you have the protests against them. So that is the reason why I think that young people, and it's shown in the research, young people do normatively support the welfare states, but not the government. And here we see an example that 80% of the young people believe that government should take more responsibility to ensure that everyone is provided for. So yeah, I will stop here regarding this. And the second interpretation, how we could interpret why the trends towards different self attitudes are strengthening, could be understood in the global rise of post-liberal ideology and theory. So the idea that liberalism that focuses on individual rights, free markets, limited government, failed to address economic concerns. And it is some political philosophy that is shared by new conservatives and Republicans, especially in the administration of Donald Trump, like, for instance, G.D. Vance and so on. And as a proof of this is an increasing number of young people that are shifting towards the right of the political spectrum. So compared with 2018, where 60% of young people self-identified as left or left-orientated, from the center to the left, to be more precise. In this study, 55% young people identified as center-leaning toward right. I'm sorry. So, why is this important? Is to understand why they are concerned, why young people are feeling concerned. As I already mentioned, the main concerns are socio-economical and existential. And most dominant concerns are about poor public services and a dysfunctional public sector, sharing concerns about inadequate healthcare system, unemployment, inability to find job, and so on and so on. So what can be also a tricky part, only relying on statistics, is this graphic here. Here we can see that it looks like the unemployment in those countries is also decreasing, just statistically looking, in all of the countries. Although only 2 countries have the unemployment rate lower than the EU average, but it is increasing. However, what these statistics, the official statistics about young unemployment, mostly overlook is the number of young people with permanent, that the number of young people with permanent contracts has dramatically declined, especially in the Western Balkans. And what we have among young people is a very insecure employment, which is a predominant characteristic of youth employment. So over 50% of overqualified young people work insecure jobs. Either they freelance or have permanent contracts or temporary contracts, working full-time or part-time or doing occasional jobs. But almost 70% are employed outside of the fields for which they have been educated, showing a mismatch between education and employment. And also, while we have a share of overqualified worker, nearly 60% of overqualified and overeducated young people work on occasional jobs. Unfortunately, the data is lacking information. How many of them hold, for instance, multiple jobs, do polywork, do they have second jobs, and how often they change the job? Because it's also important. Unfortunately, we miss this. But what we see is that the precarious employment is the predominant mode of employment among young people in all of the region. And in contrast, that this so-called gig economy is being portrayed as something that is an advantage for young people, since young people want dynamism. We see a lot of inhuman working conditions, especially among the youth outside the countries of European Union. And the desire for those people to emigrate then is also higher, not only for studying, but also for permanent migration regarding not only low jobs, but also because of political and economical reasons as well. So this mismatch between optimism among youth in EU candidate countries and EU member states was interesting for us. And we try to explain why is it so. So one of the reasons can be that this may be a rather uncritical attitude towards the European Union and a lack of understanding of the differences between the core European countries and the peripheral states of Eastern and Southeastern Europe coming from the non-EU member states. Because in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and probably in also other countries that are aspiring to become members of European Union. Oh, here is Rebecca back. Politicians don't share any visions of future of their own, but it relies solely on an empty rhetoric of EU integration and believing that the EU membership will solve all of the problems, that everything will be just solved when we become member states. However, what is also missed among the public debate of European Union here is that European Union is also facing challenges, and that it's not the same European Union it used to be 20 years ago, and that there is no consensus within EU member states on further EU integration. So it is a mismatch we see. So therefore, it can be also clear, why we see that the support for the EU countries in EU accession in some countries is declining, most notably among young people in Serbia. And at the same time, while some young people, when the EU seems something on a long run, rather prefer to migrate to poor EU countries like Germany, instead of waiting that Europe will come to them. And the main, let's say, reason is that they just do not believe that the governments will do anything about this. And this is what we also saw in the results, that the demand of young people to be heard in politics is high. Nearly 70% believe that they should have greater opportunities to speak out in politics. And this cannot be ensured only by giving some kind of quotas, like having 30, 40, 50% of young people being represented in politics. That will not solve the problem. It actually is the part of the problem, because it is not only about being represented. It is also to call for addressing fundamental systemic and social economic issues of the young people. And here we see that 60% say that their interests are not represented in national politics. So it's not only that you say, okay, we will have 40% of young people sitting in the parliament. No, if they will not address the concerns of young people, it doesn't make anything. And we see this evidence in the following. The more young people feel that they are represented in politics, they less feel the need to be heard. And when young people feel that their interests are represented in national politics, their interests in being engaged in politics also increases. And here, what is probably one concerning thing is that young people are not interested into politics. They show a very low interest in politics. So more than half of the respondents basically share a minimal or even no interest in politics at all, while only around 20% stated that they are mostly or very interested in politics. So the feeling of not being heard and the demand for a stronger voice in politics and decision making has a significant implication for democracy in Southeast Europe, also due to a widespread distrust in political institutions, parties, and leaders. We could saw in the previous slides how the distrust in political institutions, particularly in government, parliament, and political parties, is high. What is here concerning is that we see and we can see a possible normalization and acceptance of authoritarian practices and feelings among young people. Here we saw, for instance, one really, I don't know whether I should call it shocking, but 40% of young people in the region are willing to sacrifice some of their civil rights for better standards for living. So they believe that better standards of living are more important than their civic freedoms. And this follows also a regional trend of declining trust in democracy compared to 2018. Also, what is interesting somehow is that support for democracy is no longer excluded from the support for a strong leader, which is a paradox, but we can also maybe discuss about this later on. But here, almost 50% of correspondents who strongly support democracy as the best form of government simultaneously show a tendency to support an authoritarian leader who would disregard parliament and election, which is somehow in contradiction. But yeah, we can discuss about this later on. Regarding this classical political participation and democracy, still we have a high report in voting on elections among young people. So over 70% of young people said that they had voted in the last elections. Of course, we see different trends when we would look on individual countries and when we will discuss while the turnout decreased or increased. These varying trends can be, for instance, seen that a lot of young people in Turkey, which reported the highest turnout among all of the countries, 87% of the young people that took this survey in Turkey reported that they voted, can be the reason that we in 2023 had this presidential elections on which 5 million first-time voters went to the elections. And that was a generation that lived their entire life under the leadership of one party and one person. Similar, we have a high turnout in Montenegro when the long-term president Milo Đukanović also lost the election. So here we also can see that young people can be influential regarding supporting or not supporting long-time political leaders. what is interesting, what we showed, what we have seen is a difference between EU countries and non-EU countries. And that was something that was personally the most interesting part for me to analyze. Young people in the EU countries show a lower percentage of voter turnout overall, but it is increasing compared to 2018, while we have the opposite in the non-EU countries. The young people from non-EU countries are more possible to vote, but it is a declining trend since 2018. And when we talk about political participation in various non-institutional forms, they are compared with the voting on the elections quite lower. So if we have young people that are engaged outside the election, so in various non-institutional forms or non-electoral forms of participation, it is mostly through online activism, signing online petitions or sharing political context on social media, believing that those actions are meaningful political engagement. However, I would not draw a strict line between institutional and non-institutional participation, because in reality, they are very intervened and mutually conditioned. Just take an example of 2024 EU Parliament election and the increased electoral participation among youth, especially those who previously felt unheard, unrepresented, and so on, and that were mobilized and engaged by far-right parties and movements through non-institutional means like media or digital platforms. Finally, and I will try to conclude here, why are the young people polarized? I will not talk about the polarization as such or the reasons for polarization. I can leave this to discussion as well. But what we saw is that there is a strong polarization among youth in Southeast Europe, which probably is not something that would particularly be connected only for the youth in Southeast Europe. For instance, unequal access to education or employment affects political participation. So young people who are unemployed are significantly less likely to show interest to engage in political life. Probably they should be more interested to address political concerns, but they are addressing their existential needs more. So they are not really thinking that politics is important for them. Probably getting a job is something that is more important for them. Also, we saw gender inequalities that were especially prominent. For instance, young women are more likely to work in lower paid sections, such as education and healthcare, compared to the males. Also, young women are more likely to hold insecure and precarious jobs. However, they are less likely to participate in for instance, in educational mobility programs, and they also report lower political interest and political knowledge compared to young men. Here, when I say political knowledge, just to be clear, the question was that young people should say how they perceive they know about politics from 1 till 5. 5 being the highest knowledge and 1 being that they are not really knowing about politics. So it is a self-assessed political knowledge, not that we conclude that any gender is having less political knowledge than the other one. And young women from the region also feel more unrepresented in national politics than males. Also, I mentioned 2 examples where EU and non-EU countries have different trends, but interestingly, overall, we see a general convergence between EU and non-EU countries. In the previous study, 2018, there was a clear gap between EU and non-EU countries in many aspects: fears and concerns, job insecurity, democratic norms, support for authoritarian leaders, and so on and so on. It was a clear shift that non-EU countries were having less fears and less concerns, that job insecurity was mostly predominant among the young people from non-EU countries. The decline in democratic norms was more connected to people coming outside the European Union countries. Nowadays, we see that it is almost the same. So we have decline of democratic norms. Also in EU member states, we have rising fears and concerns that are almost the same among the young people of both cohorts, and so on and so on. So we see that this diversity between EU and non-EU countries is somehow dismissed. So the young people are from both parts sharing mainly similar or same concerns. So what is to be done is probably the great way to stop my presentation, and to thank you for your patience, and looking forward for your Q&A. So if you expect that I have some magic solution for this, no, I don't. But probably we all can contribute to some small steps that could lead to some developments that could probably increase some good things and decrease some bad things. But yeah, I will stop here and be ready to hear your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jasmin, for this interesting data, to be honest. And I mean, it's interesting that they do not really, so to say, completely or drastically different to what we have as youth studies from Europe, or from European countries, or more Western European countries. So I really, these are interesting results, especially also the changes. I have two questions. And then I would like to open the floor also to students, or Rebecca, who might have a question on your data. I think we have half an hour left, because my students and me, we have to go to my lecture and my Vorlesung after that. In half an hour. But I think it will be fine. So my first point is, we do know that Southeastern Europe is also characterized by a huge brain drain of young people. So now, looking into results and then the changes of the results, could it not be that the results are more so to say, a result of the brain drain, meaning that those who would have answered pro-European, or like critical
Got the point.
I mean, when
yes.
I was last year in Sarajevo, they all said, well, we keep only the ones who are not well educated, who are right-wing leaning, and those who are progressive, pro-European, and are looking for economic options, they just go to the EU, right? They go to Germany and they find jobs there. So is this change really a change in attitudes, or rather a change in those who stay in the countries, which is both not necessarily good news, but just to make a little bit right. So as we were told last year, accession to the European Union is happening by foot, right? Not by countries, but people just go. Also, the results were basically only at the end you had a difference in between like different countries, but you know your study much better. Does it make a difference if the political system is really more authoritarian, like we have it in Serbia, or more, I would still say, open, like we have at least in the Federation in Bosnia or in Albania, right? So where we have at least some more liberal attitudes and values. So what would be your take on these two questions? And afterwards, yeah, maybe the other step in.
Yeah, thank you, Solvik. Maybe Rebecca also, so I will address the questions.
All right. Yeah, I get rid of my first question. So on your, I'm sorry, my connection seems to be terrible, even though I'm in the university. And on your very first presentation of your data, that graph you had about where you compared trust in the state or trust in the welfare state versus holding of individual values, a lot of the results seem to be on a diagonal, which means that two quadrants, if I'm allowed to generalize a little, but two quadrants are virtually empty. That seems to be that there's a correlation in people's attitudes towards the state and their attitudes towards individual values, which is very counterintuitive, right? Most of our students, for instance, would be in the quadrant pro welfare state, pro individual values, which is a quadrant that was fairly empty. And then you'd think that right wing and libertarians would be in the also empty quadrant, which is anti welfare state, anti individualist values. How do you explain this, to my mind, surprising result?
So thank you both. I will start with Solvik's questions. So the first regarding the brain drain, that is something that we always discussed during writing this study, since we cannot trace the young people and we had the same cohort of young people. We couldn't see whether the same young people basically changed their opinion or we now just see those young people that were not really so loud in the previous studies that are now becoming the only basically players in the city with those conservative and right-wing values, which is concerning, to be honest. And I see that also among my students. When I started working at university, that was, let's say, 8 years ago, I had a lot of progressive students, a lot of students that were interested in being engaged, doing some extra non-curricular work, I don't know, making some manifestation at university, being interested into some kind of reading clubs at the faculty, even sharing some ideas to collect like-minded students. Now I miss those students, and most active students are those students that are active in some kind of even religious or conservative NGOs. And I also did one research, but it is a theoretical one, not so empirical, about right-wing, or we name it conservative, civil society in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is now stepping in front and basically being the most, not powerful, but I would say the most loudest civil society in the country. Not only in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's the same in Croatia, it's the same in Serbia. So I think even it doesn't have to do with whether the government is authoritarian or not. I think it's, to be honest, that question is a really good question for a research, and this data can be also used for that, because we were very limited with time and with deadlines, as we always are when some kind of researches and publications are coming through. So I had a lot of ideas what to investigate even more, not for the sake of this publication, but for my own. I also wanted to connect, I don't know, the changes of those people that are voting with the real results of parliamentary elections, and whether there is a correlation between those that are voting regarding the regime change in the countries. But it was just too much work to do, so I had not time for it. But I think that if we have this brain drain, which is obvious, I have it even in my family as well. So if we have this brain drain, and if most of those less educated young people remain, or those young people that don't share progressive values remain? Are the politicians adapting their policies to them, meaning that even you will have social democrats that will deal with conservative issues more likely than they will deal with social issues? And we see in Croatia, we see in Bosnia and Herzegovina as well, that you have social democrats that are basically telling us the same stories the nationalists and far rights or right wingers are doing, because I think they are adapting the policies to that what the voter basis wants. And the voter basis is unfortunately more conservative and getting more conservative. On the other side, I also explained it could be because of this post-liberal trend as well. And now with the Trump administration, a lot of civil society organizations in Bosnia and Herzegovina used to be financed by outside. And a lot of them were also financed by US agencies like USAID and other UN agencies. This cutting resources for USAID and other similar organizations will also affect the civil society and their empowerment of acting in countries like Bosnia and Herzegovina and other Southeast Europe countries, which can be a good thing for the conservatives. And in Republika Srpska, you have even a law that was passed, I think, 1 or 2 years ago. I cannot remember how to translate the law correctly, but it is basically a law against foreign spies or foreign agents, meaning that they want to block, cut, and censor the activities of NGOs in Republika Srpska that are being financed by foreign funds, claiming that they are some kind of foreign spies doing against the country, and so on and so on. So yes, it is a really challenging question when it comes to the society, not only to the politics, because of the to be very, very concrete, yes, because of the brain drain and because the governments are not doing anything regarding it. And the only country which is somehow benefiting are the countries in the West, while on the other side, we are low with resources, we are low with people that can do the jobs that they are educated for. And then we have different problems regarding that. Now, the question Rebecca asked, can you please just repeat once again? I wrote only part of the things, but it was about US session, right? No?
It was about your first graph, where you showed all the survey results, and the fact that the graph results were on a diagonal, it made me wonder
yes.
What was going on there.
Here I just need to make one clarification. When we talked about this individual values and when we talk about the support for a welfare state, those variables are combined variables of different variables. So that's the reason why probably we have those empty spaces in the table. But if we would probably have those variables separate, it will not be like that. For instance, the support for social welfare state was a combination of 3 items measuring just a moment to see it, measuring the extent to which responders agree on a scale from 1 till 5 with the statements: government ownership of business and industry should be increased, government should take more responsibility to ensure that everyone is provided for, and income should be made more equal between rich and poor. So those 3 items were merged, were combined into one variable, making the variable for the support for a strong welfare state. So that could be the explanation why we have those empty spaces. But if we would take all those variables, and the same happened with the variable for individual norms. That was acceptance of abortion, acceptance of homosexuality, and a social distance from the LGBTQ community. If we would probably take all those 6 variables, coloring it into 2 different colors with 3 different shades, then we will fill that gap. But that was it was a bit simplified just for the matter of presenting the results.
Thank you. It's super interesting. You have a really interesting results, it seems to me. So lots to think about.
Thank you.
So please, some of the students, just come in and raise a question or write it in the chat if you're interested to have one more questions. I mean, at least the students in the class with Jasmin have the chance to extensively talk to him tomorrow or the days that follow. But everyone feel really invited to just post one question if you want to.
I would just encourage everyone who is probably more interested into some particular country, that we also have this particular national studies which are more detailed and giving more better explanations than the regional one, because the regional one is a comparative one more than giving real answers. It just gives you a playground what to take note on.
Yeah. I mean, in general, results and what to do. Yeah, I mean, the interest in socioeconomic conditions in that they are prioritized, let's say, at the detriment of political freedom, at the detriment of political civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
I think that matters, right?
Yes, and it is also a sign for the civil activists as well that probably dealing with social economical issues would be something of better concern, because if the progressive social movements will not deal with it, then you will have regressives, you will have conservatives, you will have far rights, even religious movements, different kind of official and unofficial. We have a trend, for instance, in the Balkan countries, especially in Serbia and Bosnia, among the Orthodox community, that different so-called humanitarian organizations, basically providing humanitarian help for people in need, are basically only using that name. But what they are basically far-right movements like motorbike organizations or something like that. So they're being registered officially as a humanitarian organization, but having a very strong far-right insignia with crosses, with eagles, with all those nationalist elements. And they really don't do too much helping people. What they are doing is basically attending rallies to support the government, or I don't know, going into parts of Serbia where Muslims usually live to threaten them or to provoke them or something like that. So this trend also now emerged in some parts of Bosnia and Herzegovina where the Muslims mostly live. So doing basically the same. You have some kind of humanitarian organizations, but what they do, they are mostly Salafi organizations that are trying to build up their parallel religious institutions. So even the official Islamic community of Bosnia and Herzegovina wanted somehow to stop them, because they are making, you have the like Jemaat, which is the main, I don't know how to translate it, but let's say the main local unit of the religious community. So what they are doing, they are making parallel jamaats, non-official jamaats, where they are teaching their own ideology, not the one that is the official of the Islamic community of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So they are mobilizing their young people. They are also influencing them. They have connection to different foreign funds coming from the Gulf states. So they are basically providing the social services that the state cannot provide. And that, yeah.
Yeah. Now, what I find interesting on a general trend, I mean, Rebecca, you're more into identity, representation issues. I think that's one of your favorite topics. But if we look across the globe, usually, let's put it like that, economic grievances, socioeconomic concerns, socioeconomic grievances, if we look, for example, to Latin America, that usually leads to more left-wing populism, right? So that people that are getting much more to the left. Of course, we do see polarization, radicalization, taken for granted, of course, everywhere across the board. But what I find interesting, and this is also interesting, what I find in Germany or in Europe in general, that we do see support increasing for more, even more conservative values and for more right-wing values. But it's for me so contradictory, because it's exactly those values and those governments who support rather, for example, multinational corporations who have not in their electoral programs support for worker rights, social rights. So this is for me a huge, well, I wouldn't call it dilemma, but what we do see, which,
I think that the main,
right?
I think that the main problem is that the European left, being mostly understood as social democratic parties, somehow oriented towards different policies, not towards socio-economical policies, more towards, I don't know, either identity or some particular interests, and not really dealing with socio-economical issues. And that's the place, an empty space remained on this ideological line, where the right wing started now to emphasize, it started to jump into this empty space that the left, mostly social democrat parties, are not really caring too much on. And I think that's the reason why mainly far-right political parties are jumping into this empty space of social policies that are being left by the social democrats. You have some small tries of left populism, for instance, in Croatia, in Serbia, not really, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, also not. You have some kind of environmental protectionists, but they are not that typical left-wing populist political forces at all. Slovenia has something, but it's really weak. It's really weak, and that's my biggest concern. If the progressives and left-wingers are not going back to those social issues, I think then we will leave that space for the conservatives. And I think that was also the main concern of Chantal Mouffe in some of her texts as well, blaming.
I would allow myself to disagree slightly here, at least in the cases I'm looking at here, where people who should be concerned with economic issues are concerned with economic issues, but they don't want the welfare state. That's why they're moving to the right. That's my experience here. What they talk about, they talk about two topics, and that's probably internationally the case. They talk about migration. They think that it's the migrants that lower the wages, and Chantal Mouffe agrees with that. The other thing they're talking about is that that the wrong people benefit from the welfare state. And basically, the ideology that's behind it, and it's the ideology of neoliberalism, is the meritocracy. What people hate is the idea that people who are poor are elevated out of their poverty, because basically the poor deserve to be poor. We, the working poor, are financing those who are even poorer and the recent migrants, but also the decadent lifestyles of urbanists who have maybe gay lifestyles or whatever. So the resentment is a resentment against redistribution. So that's precisely the reason why the new movement and the young people are not into the welfare state, not into left-wing movements in the traditional way, and which is why I also think social democrats cannot go back to the old topics to win back the right. The people have imbibed meritocracy to the degree that they've become welfare chauvinists. And I stop talking. My connection is bad.
That's a great point. Probably not so present in Southeast Europe because we don't have so much immigrants working, but it also will be something in the future. I see last year I was in Croatia, in Zagreb, and I was really shocked to see how many of people from the Far East are working in Zagreb. 2 years ago, it was unimaginable to see it. So with those trends, I think the same will affect even our countries. And I also see in some places in Bosnia already that a lot of people from India, Bangladesh, and other states from the Far East are working. And when I come to Germany, I hear our people working there. So yes, that's basically the problem, and the problem of redistribution will become, as you mentioned. This is a great point. Basically, it's the problem of redistribution that the people don't want that those who don't work, or that those who come here to work, they don't want to give the public money, their own money to them, which is an aspect we don't still have as much as you have, but we will. Yeah, thank you for the comment.
Thank you, Jasmin. I think we close the discussion. I think it's a really, really interesting discussion. It's a pity we couldn't have you in Leipzig, Jasmin. But I think the one who regretted most is basically you, I think. But
what can I do?
Yeah, exactly. What can I do? And it's more important to care for health. I can only tell you this is like really a matter which should be at the center. So
this was an energizer for me, to be honest. I missed to talk.
Interacting. Yeah. But you will be exhausted after that. Based on my experience, if you
I know
for a while sick and then you step in with all the energy and then anyway, you are always invited to Leipzig, right? And I think our Erasmus Plus program is going on for another 2 years.
Yes,
plenty
I
of
think
opportunities to come.
And maybe the best option is that I come touristic just to break this course of cancellation, and then I will apply again.
And if you don't come here, we'll come to you. That's a threat.
Yeah, okay.
No, well, it's not a threat, Rebecca. It's an honest.
It's reality.
We have options. Many of us already have been in Bosnia, so you can really go and give lectures there. This will be
yes. Feel free to contact me if you are interested. So it would be great to have you here.
Yeah, and we travel regularly, so we will be in Bosnia with master students in 4 weeks.
Yeah, we are currently making some preparations to make it possible. Yeah.
Good. But anyway, thank you for the students who are here, who listened.